Hey everybody, this is Corey Brewer with Windermere Property Management. Thought what I'd do for this month's tip, it's April 7th, so the information contained in this video is good as of April 7th. We'll see if it changes anytime soon. But I wanted to talk about the most common call that I've been getting lately from realtors, and that is about how can my client go about selling a home that is tenant occupied? And that used to be a pretty basic question that I used to be able to give a pretty broad answer that would suit most situations. But over the last couple of years, the answer to that question has taken on a lot of requirement for me to get a lot more details about the individual situation before I can kind of direct people down the right path. So I'm just going to talk about a few of the most common over the next couple minutes here. The first thing, well, there's a couple things that are crucial to understand when we are talking about this topic, selling a tenant-occupied property. And most of the time, the goal is for the tenancy to end before the home goes on the market for sale. That is almost always the case. So we're looking at a couple very important things. First of all is property type. Second of all is location. And third is the type of lease or tenancy that we're working with, whether it's a fixed term lease or a month-to-month lease. All three of those things are equally important. I wouldn't say that any one is more or less important than the other. They all factor into the decision. So starting with location, generally speaking, statewide, and for most of our footprint here in the King and Snohomish County areas, most homes do fall under the statewide legal doctrines. The most glaring exception being the city of Seattle, and I'll get to that in a minute. And there are some other smaller little pockets with slightly different rules. City of Kenmore just very recently passed some different rules. There are pockets of unincorporated King County that aren't covered by any given set of city limits that might have some different rules. So you do need to be careful about your location. But generally speaking, there's state of Washington and then there's city of Seattle. And then specifically in Seattle, the property type is important because if it's a condo or a townhouse unit, it's a different set of rules than a single family house. And then finally, the type of tenancy will determine whether or not the theory of just cause would be applied to the situation. However, in Seattle, it doesn't matter what type of tenancy it is because just cause applies to everything. So there are several factors that come into play before I can answer the question about how do you end a tenancy so that the owner can sell the property. I think probably the most important thing to know is that even if you've given the proper amount of days notice on this, you cannot preemptively cut short a fixed term lease. So generally speaking, the notice that is required on this is a 90-day notice, and that would apply to any month-to-month tenancy. Today is April 7th, for example. So if we set a 90-day notice, the 90th day would fall during the first week of, July. You'd go to May, June, July. The notice would be effective at the end of July. So it's 90 days and then through the end of that month where the 90th day falls. However, if you were giving a 90-day notice on a lease that ran through the end of October, for example, you could give that 90-day notice now, but effectively it would be more like a 180-day notice because you could not set an effective date on that notice of the tenancy ending prior to October 31st because that is a fixed term lease that is in place until that date. So that's a crucial element to this. It also depends outside of Seattle whether your tenancy has always been a fixed term tenancy or if at any point it has ever been month to month. If in certain situations it may fall under this umbrella of just cause. And if it doesn't, then you can probably get away with a 60-day notice, and you don't necessarily have to identify the reason, that being that the owner is planning to sell the property. So it can start to get complicated. I'm happy to take your calls on this. In the city of Seattle specifically, say that 10 times fast. If you've got a condo unit or a townhouse unit or anything other than a freestanding single family home, this becomes a little bit more difficult equation. And the technical option is that you can sell the home at any time. There are no restrictions on when you actually sell the property. This is more about the tenancy ending. And if you can't work something out with the tenant prior to selling the property, then the new owner, upon closing and taking ownership, can then give a 90-day notice of their intent to occupy the home. So it's not as smooth of a process. The finish line's a little further out in the future, but that would be the mechanism. And then in Seattle, I mentioned, it doesn't matter whether the tenancy is a fixed term or a month-to-month tenancy. It falls under the same set of rules now. That's a fairly new development legally. And I think the last thing I would want to say there regarding Seattle is there's also this idea that a tenant, upon the expiration of their lease, be given the first right of refusal to renew their lease. But that doesn't necessarily come into play when we are talking specifically about the situation where you have a client with a tenant-occupied property and they're looking for their options to end that tenancy and then sell the property. So again, that's probably the most common question I've been getting over the past 6 to 12 months. And hopefully that sheds a little light on the situation. And again, happy to take your questions on this. See you later. Thanks. Bye.